Ever get frustrated with like a flickering light bulb?
Yeah, pretty much every time I change one.
Makes you think about how amazing it is that we have electric light at all.
Totally.
Like, remember back in the day,
Hmm.
kerosene lamps, whale oil, all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That wasn't really that long ago.
Right.
But you guys wanted us to take a deep dive into the story of Thomas Edison and the incandescent bulb.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going to do today. We've got some really interesting firsthand accounts and some old newspaper clippings, even some audio from another history podcast we found.
Cool.
So we're going to talk about the challenges and the triumphs, and maybe even debunk a few myths about Edison and the light bulb along the way.
Sounds good.
But let's kind of take a step back for a second before we get into Edison.
Okay.
What was life like before we had electric lights?
Well, you'd have to rely on candles or whale oil lamps or gas lights for just about everything.
Well, those don't sound very fun.
No, not really.
Mhm.
They were dim and messy and unreliable, and of course, fire hazard.
Yeah, fire hazard for sure.
Even gas lamps, which, were brighter, still weren't great. I mean,
Yeah.
they produced a lot of heat, blackened the walls, and could fill a room with dangerous fumes if you weren't careful.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah. And so you can imagine, just how revolutionary the idea of electric light must have seemed at the time.
I mean, like clean and bright and more controllable light, that's got to be huge.
Oh, yeah, it was a big deal. And, even before Edison came along, there were others trying to use electricity for lighting. Like arc lamps were already in use.
Right. I've heard of those, but they sound pretty intense.
Yeah, they were, and not really practical for everyday use, too bright and unreliable.
Makes sense. So what were some of the other challenges these early inventors were facing?
Well, one of the big ones was something they called subdividing the light.
Subdividing the light, what does that mean?
It basically means figuring out how to make multiple smaller lights from a single power source that could be turned on and off independently.
Ah, so like you wouldn't have your whole house lighting up every time you flipped one switch.
Exactly.
That would be pretty inconvenient.
To say the least.
Okay, so let's talk about Thomas Edison. Then the guy who seemed to embody like American ingenuity.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about him and his background and what got him so interested in electricity.
Well, Edison was a fascinating guy, a real tinkerer and inventor right from when he was a kid. I mean, he started out selling newspapers on trains when he was like a teenager,
Wow,
and even set up this little laboratory in a baggage car.
that's pretty entrepreneurial.
Yeah, he definitely had that entrepreneurial spirit, and that combined with his interest in electricity really set the stage for his amazing career.
I mean, it sounds like he was born to be an inventor.
He really does.
Was the electric light like his first big invention, though?
Oh, no, not at all. He actually already had a bunch of successful inventions and patents to his name before he ever tackled the electric light. I mean, he developed an automatic vote counter and a fire alarm system, and he even made some major improvements to the telegraph.
Wow, he really was a machine.
It was.
So let's talk about Menlo Park for a second, his famous invention factory.
Okay.
What made this place so special?
Well, Menlo Park was located in New Jersey, and it was basically the first research and development facility in America. I mean,
Mhm.
Edison's idea was to create this collaborative space where he and his team of engineers could experiment and test their ideas and, bring their inventions to life.
It sounds like the Silicon Valley of the 19th century.
Yeah, you could say that.
So when Edison started working on the electric light, was he basically starting from scratch, or were there other people already working on similar ideas?
Oh, no, he definitely wasn't alone in the race to make the incandescent bulb a reality. The basic concept had actually been around for decades, and there were a number of inventors who were trying to figure out how to make a practical and affordable electric light.
Interesting. So what was the missing piece of the puzzle then?
Well, there were really two key challenges. First, there was that whole issue of subdividing the light that we talked about earlier. But the bigger hurdle was finding a material that would work for the filament. The part of the bulb that actually glows when it's heated up by the electric current.
Okay, so that was the make or break factor, the filament material.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What they needed was a material that was durable enough to withstand the intense heat for, a reasonable amount of time. Most of the stuff they tried just burned up too quickly.
That makes sense.
So they were looking for something that was a good conductor of electricity, but also strong enough to last.
So it sounds like Edison wasn't necessarily trying to invent the light bulb. completely from scratch,
Right.
but to make it practical and affordable for everyday people.
Exactly.
And from what I've read, he was pretty ambitious about achieving that goal.
Oh, yeah. He actually made this really bold claim that he would light up all of Manhattan with his incandescent bulb.
Wow. That's a pretty big statement.
It was, and it definitely captured the public's imagination and fueled his determination to succeed.
So what did they start experimenting with?
Well, they had some early success with platinum filaments.
Platinum.
Yeah, it has a high melting point, and it's a good conductor of electricity, but it was also really expensive, and the filaments were actually too fragile to be practical.
Okay, so platinum's out. What did they try next?
Well, they basically went on this massive hunt for the perfect filament material. I mean, they tried hundreds of different things, anything they could get their hands on.
Like what?
Oh, silk horsehair fishing line, even beard hair from members of his team.
Beard hair. Seriously.
Yeah, it's true. They were really dedicated to finding a solution.
That's incredible. So did they eventually find it?
They did, and it turned out to be something pretty simple, actually.
Oh, really? Like what?
Carbonized cotton thread.
Wow, who would have thunk?
I know, right? Simple, but it worked.
So I can just imagine being in that lab, back in 1879,
Yeah.
watching that little filament glow for hours on end.
Must have been amazing.
What a moment.
Totally. But, creating a working light bulb, that was just the first step.
Right, because you can't exactly just plug it into the wall, right?
Exactly. He needed a way to power those bulbs, on a larger scale.
Yeah, so like a whole system for generating and distributing electricity.
Exactly, and that's what he set out to do. I mean, while his team was working on perfecting the bulb, he was also developing dynamos and meters and this whole network of underground wiring.
Wow, talk about ambitious.
Yeah, it was a huge undertaking.
So like, where did he even begin with all that?
Well, the first step was to build a power station.
Okay.
The world's first commercial central power station, actually.
And where was this?
In Lower Manhattan, they called it Pearl Street Station.
Pearl Street Station. I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
Like this building full of giant dynamos generating enough electricity to light up a whole section of the city.
It was pretty incredible.
So what was it like, the grand opening, all those lights coming on for the first time?
It was a huge event. September 4th, 1882, Edison flipped the switch himself, and over 8,000 light bulbs lit up all over Lower Manhattan.
Wow, that must have been something else.
It was a really defining moment in history for sure.
So did it all go smoothly, though? I mean, were there any problems with scaling up this new electrical system?
Well, there were definitely challenges. I mean, remember how we talked about the limitations of direct current?
Right, like it can't travel very far without losing power.
Exactly. And that became a big issue when they started trying to expand the system beyond that half-mile radius from the station.
Because they'd have to build more power stations.
Yeah, and that was expensive and complicated. So it started to become clear that, maybe direct current wasn't the best solution for widespread electrical distribution after all.
So was there a better option?
Well, there was this new system that was starting to emerge called alternating current, or AC.
AC as opposed to DC.
Right. And it was a total game changer. I mean, unlike DC, which only flows in one direction, AC reverses direction many times per second.
And why is that important?
Well, it meant that AC could be transmitted over much longer distances without losing power.
Ah, so that solves the distance problem.
Pretty much.
So did Edison jump on board with this new AC technology?
Well, not exactly. See, he had invested a lot in direct current, both financially and, personally. He really believed in his system and wasn't ready to give up on it.
Even though AC seemed like a better option?
Yeah. And that difference of opinion actually led to one of the most famous rivalries in history, the War of the Currents.
The War of the Currents?
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It was a big battle between Edison and another brilliant inventor named Nikola Tesla, who was a huge believer in AC.
Tesla, I've heard that name.
Yeah, he actually worked for Edison for a little while, but they had a falling out, partly because of their different views on AC versus DC.
Wow, so it was like a clash of the titans.
Yeah, pretty much a battle for the future of electricity.
Okay, so before we get into the details of this War of the Currents,
Sure.
I think we need to acknowledge, the incredible impact that Edison had on the world. I mean, his persistence and his ingenuity and his business sense, it all came together to bring electric light to the masses, and that changed everything.
No question about it. His contributions are undeniable.
But it is interesting to think about what might have happened if things had gone differently.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, like, what if Edison had been the one to champion AC instead of DC?
Yeah, what if?
Would the world of electricity be different today? Would it have happened faster, maybe?
It's hard to say, but it definitely makes you wonder.
Yeah, it's a real what-if moment in history.
It is. It shows how complex innovation really is, personalities clashing and progress taking unexpected turns.
Absolutely. I mean, even the most brilliant minds can have their blind spots.
That's true, and that's part of what makes history so fascinating, all the twists and turns and unexpected outcomes.
For sure. So I guess the story of innovation is never really over, is it?
Nope, it just keeps going.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into the world of Thomas Edison and the incandescent light bulb. We've come a long way from the days of candles and gaslights, haven't we?
We have.
And there's still so much more to explore, especially this whole war of the currents between Edison and Tesla.
Oh, yeah. That's a story in itself.
So if you want to hear more about that epic showdown, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive and join us for our next episode. You won't want to miss it. Yeah, it really makes you appreciate, how far we've come.
It does.
But it also makes you think about all the other people who are working on this too. Not just Edison.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, innovation is rarely a solo act, right?
Right. There were so many others who contributed to making the electric light a reality.
Exactly. And, while Edison gets a lot of the credit, it's important to remember those who came before him, the ones who laid the groundwork.
Absolutely. It's a team effort, for sure. So speaking of those who came after Edison, what happened next? Where did the story of electricity go from there?
Well, we were talking about the battle between direct current and alternating current.
Yeah.
And that was far from over. The war of the currents was still raging on with Edison and Tesla, fighting for their systems.
I bet that was intense.
It was a really fierce rivalry. So, one of the big turning points was the development of the transformer.
The transformer.
Yeah, it's this device that can step up and step down the voltage of electricity, which is really important for transmitting power over long distances.
Ah, so it makes AC more efficient.
Exactly. And that made AC much more suitable for powering cities and industries.
So that was a big win for AC.
It was. So how did Edison react to this? Well, he didn't give up easily.
Of course not.
He was still convinced that DC was the safer and more practical option, even though the evidence was pointing in the other direction.
Really? So what did he do?
Well, he actually tried to discredit AC, even using some pretty scary tactics to try to convince people that it was dangerous.
Wow. Sounds like he was fighting a losing battle, though.
He was. And in the end, AC won out. I mean, it was just so much more efficient and versatile for transmitting power over long distances.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So AC became the dominant system, and that's what we use today.
That's right.
Wow. It's amazing to think about how all this, shaped the world we live in.
It really is. And it makes you wonder what might have happened if Edison had embraced AC instead of resisting it.
Right? Like, would things have been different? Would the adoption of AC have been faster?
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it?
It is, but I guess we'll never know for sure.
Nope. It's one of those what-ifs of history.
Well, one thing's for certain, though. The story of electricity is a testament to human ingenuity. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, our constant drive to learn and to figure out how to harness the power of nature, it's pretty incredible.
Absolutely. So I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Thomas Edison and the electric light.
A truly illuminating journey.
It really was, and we've learned so much about the challenges and the triumphs and the lasting impact of this incredible era of innovation.
And the story isn't over yet.
That's right. There's always more to explore. So if you've enjoyed this journey with us, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more insightful conversations about the ideas and innovations that have shaped our world.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep those minds curious and those lights burning bright.